Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Marina podcast. I am, of course, your host, Marina, and I have an amazing guest on the show today with me. I have Sarah McLachlan, who is, I'm going to read this because it's such a juicy bio. She is a connection coach and relationship specialist, an expert in how to create and ignite connection to align, attract, and amplify rewarding relationships. Through her own health, relationships, and immune system journey, she is well-versed in both evidence-based science alongside the power of energetic realm and quantum field for healing health, powerful partnership catalysts, and levitating our lives through love. Sarah is also a physiotherapist of 14 years, a Pilates and bar instructor, a health and wellness expert, and an athlete. She has represented Australia multiple times as a road cyclist, plus she loves to pole dance on the side. Her mission as a neurolinguistics programming coach, she is here to help align, attract, and amplify rewarding relationships, cultivate conscious connections and fulfilling relationships. Sarah's personal intention is to empower her clients to create and live their dream life with real love, incredible energy, and absolute joy. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me here, Marina, and thank you for being that shining light for us all in the world at the moment.
Oh, bless. So, Sarah, we always start the show with two kind of off-topic questions. The first, of course, is what is the animal that best represents your personality or your way of being?
I love this question. For me, it's a dancing baby goat. So you know how you see like the baby goats like doing parkour around like barns and things, just having fun and jumping in the air and bouncing around the place. That is quite literally
just up and down.
I am. Yes.
Yes, I think I often get told, I have so much energy, but I know through working with you and what you do in life that you are right up there on the energy levels as well. So I can see you as a dancing goat. That's awesome. And then what about which superpower would you choose to have and why?
Oh, that's a tricky one. My current superpower is being able to smell things really easily. But if I had a superpower, probably just to transport, like literally to just go to be somewhere else. Yeah,
not necessarily around there faster.
Yeah, or just to be in another place in an instant, to be able to take in the world. Yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, cool. Now, Sarah, you are a connection coach. You help people attract and ignite amazing relationships. So how did you come to be a connection coach? Like, why is this, your path and your purpose? And how did you come to do this work?
Well, as we're taking it right back to my first career journey, so to speak, as a physiotherapist, I found the most rewarding part of being a physio to establish that relationship and that rapport and that connection with my clients. I wanted to feel and see them get better and heal and be back doing what they loved. And part of that was to actually understand what they loved and understand their motivators for life, and just to connect with them was so rewarding. Now, if I fast forward that to even times now, what I truly enjoy with my clients is to step into their shoes and see the world through their eyes and to connect with them and what they want, really, to actually feel it in myself through their explanation and their reviews of the world, and connect with them is the most important thing. And for the longer I am on this planet, I realize how important it is for all humans of all walks of life to be feeling that connection to another, especially with how the world has been in the last, year, I think now, year almost to the day, where when we take away what we take for granted as connection, we realize how important it is.
So you help people find connection, though? Is that the ultimate goal? Yeah.
So,
so why is connection so important?
Why is connection important? Well, for me, I feel, and I've learned that part of our human drives on this being and in our systems is to, one, be safe, and to be in belonging. And to be in belonging is to have that connection and to have that fulfillment through connection. So I truly want people to experience that connection. And what brought me to be in this connection relationship realm is through my own seeking connection with another, and the ways in which we humans go about that process.
Yeah. So it's so often the way, isn't it, that what we end up doing for work is something that we either journeyed on ourselves or had to learn or move through. Because also the beautiful thing about that, like people often think, oh, I don't want to share that was something I had to work on, but it therefore gives you actually, my way of thinking, not just street cred, but genuine experience. Because if it's something you've moved through, then you are essentially literally a guide to guide others because you've journeyed there. So tell us about, why you think the world needs connection coaches. Like I get that connection is important. I agree with you 100%. Belonging is a deep driver of humans. So I suppose my point is why do we need coaching on that if it's a human need, and why are we not in connection, and how do we kind of muck it up that we would need help with that?
Sure. So there's lots of things to cover in that. So I guess for me, it starts with, so say we take relationship connections. So for me, that is something that I worked so hard to obtain in this lifetime, to be fair. I feel like part of my athlete momentum to like work really hard and do all the right things and dot all your I's and cross your T's and be so strongly driven. I used that in my relationships and not necessarily in a healthy way. So Marina, I had no problems attracting men. It was keeping them. It was truly keeping them because I'd keep dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and I'd drive them away in my want and my desire to have that relationship and have that connection, because it was so important to me. And it was like, for me at the time and in the years that were so upsetting and so traumatic, it just got worse. The stronger I worked to try to obtain this thing that I look around and everyone else had. It's like, well, what's wrong with me if Isabel got married at 24 and I'm 34 and still single? Like, well, what am I doing wrong here? Like, I'm trying real hard here. And for each relationship I'd reach to and do all the right things in the way my programming facilitated wanting and needing connection, literally was driving them away.
Yeah.
And it was through relationship after relationship where I would do the things I thought was right, and they would run, they would leave, and I would be left in a hot mess. And it actually got worse over time, to be honest. My emotional reaction to even shorter relationships became so amplified and so scared and so left on the outer, is how I viewed it, of society, because I just wanted to get married and be in a healthy relationship, and what's wrong with me if I can't have that? And it took a relationship recovery where I started to be more aware of self-development and how important it was to look at how we are as humans, where I truly did the work to manifest a man. So I learned about the powers of manifesting, and I had my lists, and I called in this amazing man who was all the things on my list, and handsome and tall and available, and literally an energetic match, with both being dancing baby goats. And he left. So dropped the mic. I was like, but I manifested him, but he's on my list and everything is great. And it turns out through retrospect, which is a wonderful thing, right, that I called him in from the repeating wound and pattern that had been every man prior to that. And I had to have my first panic attacks. I had to go through obscene loss and abandonment. Like, my family were on the other side of the country. I wasn't part of the community yet I'd moved to. I was so incredibly physically and emotionally alone and without connection. And I truly, at that point and before then, didn't even know how to connect with myself. And it was from that landing on the bottom that I reached for a coach and I started to do the work, and I started to peel back the layers of which we are. We're like onions, right? And discover what was driving my way of being. And how I was calling in these men, not because I was broken or damaged or doing anything wrong necessarily, but I knew no different. And I didn't know how to connect with myself. And I know some people call that self-love, but for some reason, the word self-love never really landed for me. I didn't like it. It was too wishy-washy or social media'd to the hills. And I was like, oh, blah, blah, self-love. But it was just different words that I needed to hear and receive to actually realize that the connection with myself, or lack thereof, was why things were panning out as they were for one reason, but there was lots of reasons that I didn't understand about myself or relationships that drove me to the biggest catalyst and learning experience. Like, I wish, and as I say to clients even now, that it's like you can't go online and Google or download blah, 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 and pay like $50 and download the information and just pop it in your brain and, oh, I'm wise and I know all the things now. You literally have to go through the experience and get to the bottom and go through the traumas, really, or the heartbreaks or the wounds or patterns, for the experience to evolve your own wisdom or your own perspective. So I look back on it now with gratitude, but at the time it was freaking awful. And I'm going to try not to swear right now, but it was literally the most heavy experience that I have been through. I had a quite safe and sound upbringing. So for me to, or relatively speaking, I guess, for me to get to that place of darkness and not knowing and like revealing, like there from the dark there can only be the light, right? So it was through that relationship trauma where I learned so much. And in learning and going through it and actually then being different and seeing different and going, whoa, this is a different man I'm attracting. Whoa, like this is a different way I'm even being at work or with my friends, because how I'm relating with myself is how I'm now relating differently to others. And it's life is being different. And it was quite unusual or shocking or foreign initially. But when I saw through the positive change that was facilitated from that different way of being, I literally went, I need to help other people get through this, because in changing your way of being and lifting your awareness, it's a freaking game changer. Other people need to know this, other people need to experience this, and other people need to know that they aren't alone and they're not, oh, I'll never find a man, or like relationships are always going to end or they're always going to leave. We have these stories and they aren't true, but if we keep believing they're true, they will run our lives. And I truly just got called to bring this learning and this knowledge and the power of the changes that are possible to others. And literally it drove me away from being hands-on physio related, because to learn about your patterns and your stories and your wiring and firing is a completely different approach to healing. I've gone from being a physical healer almost for bodies and injuries to actually helping people heal their way of being in relationships.
That's awesome. Yes, I can relate. And I agree that everything we want really is on the other side of enhanced self-awareness and self-mastery, which is why obviously I'm such a stand for growth work. And also I agree with you, and I think more people need to know that the universe has a perfect accounting system. You know, it's only showing up the way it's showing up because that's what you're inputting out as the frequency. And so all of the change we want externally starts internally with our codes. 100%, couldn't agree more. So You mentioned too, though, that your approach as an athlete, and I'm smiling because it's such a masculine approach. And of course, masculine and feminine energies exist inside of men and women. So this is not, please don't mistake if you're listening for me saying that as a man's way of approaching it. We're well beyond a gender discussion when we're talking energetics. But, that achieve and perfectionism and, attaining, definitely, if you want to embody the feminine aspect of a created relationship, it might get you the connection or the opportunity to be in connection, but it won't be sustained there, will it? Because a man who has masculine energy is just going to literally over time start running from that experience, or at least fighting it. And I'm wondering, is that something that you feel beyond, like you kind of said it wasn't ever your issue attracting versus sustaining. So are they different things for different people? Like, do some people have issues attracting, or do some people like you have issues not with attracting, but with sustaining? Or can you have an issue with both? Like, what are you noticing is more prevalent with your clients at the moment?
Sure. Well, I do think, like, off the cusp and as a straight up answer, I do think people can struggle with the polarities or the different mechanisms to attract, as well as in sustaining.
Yeah.
Of course, like we are very quick to judge people who show up a certain way, who are very maybe demanding in their essence in the room, like they demand attention and they're very strong and they're very loud or direct and focused. We're very quick to judge those people. And it's obviously just that initial judgment that is your attraction point sometimes. So for people who are showing up initially in a certain way, it can repel against them or work for them. So for me, I guess in my example, I was like an initiator. I would follow up, I would action things, which is obviously like a chaser role, which is more into the masculine way, which for men that are strong, that's not an issue necessarily, but over time, I'm taking their job away from them.
Yeah.
Really. And
men or the masculine energy likes to hunt. That's right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So like I speak quite openly to my clients saying, I wanted a relationship that was really calm and easygoing and fluid and felt peaceful. But once I was in relationship, I was absolute opposite to all of that as an athlete, truly. And that's obviously my way of being. But it was only when I started to shine the lights on the parts of me that were more relaxed and can be easygoing and actually bring myself out into all of the ways I can be. It's not that the other ways were wrong. It's not that they were bad or I had to like push them away or change who I was. It was more about going, okay, well, there's parts of Sarah that love going down to sunset with a drink and just sitting still and being like feet in the sand and relaxing. But I didn't let her come out and play very often because I was too busy doing something else or preparing for the next day. So to shift how I was being, even before I called in the partner, I had to start doing those things for myself and really provide the things for myself. I was hunting in my masculine these relationships down in order for it to land. So yes, like I had to do it almost in an attraction end of the scale as well as in a sustaining the relationship end as well.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because what we're attracting is coming to that initial frequency. And if you might be able to attract it, but do you even want that, as you're saying, as you obviously learn for yourself? So if someone listening today is unable or feels like they're unable to attract, like they're like, I just feel like I literally can't get a date with someone that I'm even interested in. Like they just seem to either be misfiring or they feel like they're not able to call in or to magnetize or to get interest. Let's look at that category, because I'm sure there are lots of men and women. I actually just recently did a coaching session with a man very much in this boat. So this is definitely not a conversation just for women. Both men and women, we're all human. And if we identify as something other than, male or female as gender, we're all seeking connection. So if someone out there is like, I feel like I cannot find anybody, what would be your advice to them? Like as a starting place, what would be your top tips or your advice? Like what do they need to sit with or do, or what would be your advice as a connection coach?
Great. So In my mini program, Manifest Your Match, we have 5 steps through that. So it's quite important that for people who are like, where is anyone? There's no one. Yeah. We want to first look at getting crystal clear clarity as the first step to really define what this nothingness is that's not showing up. Because sometimes when we start to identify it and define this person, it helps your brain to identify it when it is around you. Sometimes we're searching for something that we haven't actually outlined in ourselves. Yeah. So it's really hard to find something if you don't know what you're looking for in a nutshell. So that's the first place to start. Yes. A lot of people have done that. In that program, we actually even go into the absolute essentials, like the deal breakers, which might be something as simple as loyalty, through to things that would be nice, but it's not essential. So to have that scope around your values too, what's important to you and what you want to have show up in the relationship would also be part of that foundation. From there, we take it into a visioning process, because we know, especially athletes, if you think of athletes at an Olympic level, they use visualization to create their outcome and their goal. It programs it into your system, it programs it into your wiring, a body that can see it and have it happen physiologically. It's like it sets your system up that it's done and it's safe and it's sound. So to then take those traits and start to visualize a life with that partner and what you're doing. So you might have this big grand list, but how does that look? How does that look and how does that feel? They're the next 2 important pieces to extrapolate from the surface level listing. So what does it look like? As in how playful are you in the kitchen together? Do you have comfortable silences all the time that are really peaceful and at ease? And then from that vision and that future reality, we want to pull from it the feeling, because it's the feeling that we're going for in all things. We want something because of how it makes us feel. So we pull from that vision what it feels like, and those feelings and those emotional accelerants to that relationship being embodied. So from the feelings of a relationship, vision provides for you. So when you're really in that moment and seeing, and it is playful and it's joyful, we want to draw on that, which is a Joe Dispenza concept called coherence. Like, he speaks of that quite strongly. If you want to reference any of his material, he has a lot of science and literature around this, because we all know as a physio, I want to know the science behind things. And we want to actually pull that feeling and create that feeling within ourselves. And I found this is quite a big sticky point for a lot of my clients. They're like, oh, I don't know how to provide that for myself. Oh, what do you mean? No, I only get that when I'm with the partner. And it's like, well, no, like, we attract what we are, not what we want. Yeah. You don't just create a list and stick it on your fridge. You actually have to go to the supermarket and get the things and actually do the work. They don't just land in your fridge, right? So we need to actually embody the feelings and the emotions that are driving this need and this want, because perhaps there are things that we're missing in our lives that we actually do need to start providing for ourselves. And that's where my biggest lesson landed. I was looking externally for those feelings and those needs to be met, when it was my job and only my job for those things to show up in my life. And then, only then, can that partner land safely. If I'm not providing that platform and those things for myself, how's that going to land if I'm only getting it externally and I can't provide it for myself? Yeah. So where I like to say, like, self-love is the precursor to true love. It is the self-love, or the connection with yourself, and the creation of those feelings where you can start to attract in the partner that you feel like you can't find. Yeah. So to bring it back to that question, like, if you're not finding that person, how are you being and where are you going, perhaps? Because a tool in that piece of our steps is to actually look at, like, the feeling that you want, from the relationship, but then see where you can get that feeling for yourself. And what that's going to do is put you in placement in the real world to people who have those similar interests and do want to feel the same. Like one of my clients is very aligned with stand-up paddleboarding and being in the ocean, and it feels like home for her. And it's like, well, that's your happy place, right? She's like, absolutely. That's when she feels like the world is complete. So the more she can provide that feeling and that completion that she's looking for in another, one, she's going to start to feel like she's already landed that relationship, so she can draw it in energetically. But two, she's likely to meet a partner who has very similar values, very similar interests, and is going to be around people, at least contacts and connections, within that feeling and that realm. And of course, they're going to be around and land from there.
All right.
So there's some of the early steps.
I think that's great advice. And I think you're absolutely right, because the brain can't find a void. It can only find thing, it can only, and by having that awareness for the people who are like, there's no one out there. Well, if we're focused on the no one, then there is nothing. But as you said, getting clarity and getting clear and then getting into coherence. So I think that's brilliant advice. Now, what about people who, like you were saying, I can call in heaps of people. I got people coming left, right, and center. None of them create healthy relationships, or they end up ghosting, or there's some pattern that kind of keeps repeating after connection is created. Maybe it's fabulous for 3 months and then the shit hits the fan, or maybe they come into connection and there's physical chemistry, but they still feel like, I don't know. I mean, it could be any number of different things, right? But basically things spiral afterwards. So why does that happen? And what would your advice be to someone who's like, how do I make sure that stops happening? Or how do I bring in real heart-centered connection instead of those old patterns?
Yes. So this is sometimes where we start to see, so when we move beyond like our initial foundational work, which we're just talking about, there comes a point where there's something sometimes in our system, like a story or a belief that has been preset or programmed earlier on in life, usually under 7. And it might be something minor. So I'm not talking about like a massive trauma, which we would consider something where someone may go to jail. We're talking about something that as a little boy or a little girl, we've actually just programmed in our system as being true for us. And sometimes those things serve us, as in when it's sunny, we go outside and we play. So we're going to wire that in our systems. It's like sun equals going outside and playing. So we're happy when it's sunny. I want to say sinister, but that's not quite the right word. Patterns that are set for us, which as a toddler were the end of the world or were really bad. And they sit there in our system and they play out further into life. So sometimes we have the stories sitting there and they'll start to be seen as a pattern. And like you said, you might not have any issue calling them in, but then when you bring them in, the same thing happens and they ghost and they disappear. That's often because we're showing up to, or energetically, 2 parts there, we're either showing up in a way that is then repelling, which I've spoke about, or energetically there's something in our system that then makes us be a certain way and will make the person run, in a nutshell, without going into too much depth here. So it's those stories and those programs which can, unbeknownst to us, literally have the relationship fall apart.
Yes, well, that's right. So the way I often describe that is, those imprints of those rules, if you will, because we have to have them be right for our own safety and survival. They essentially, because we're that powerful, we manifest them, and we manifest them in co-creation, which is why relationships are so often a magnetizing of 2 individuals whose souls are actually seeking the healing of the pattern. So their propensity to react to your pattern is precisely why you both come together, so that you can heal it. And, referencing earlier what you said, like the things seem to get worse and worse and worse, because that's how much the universe or source or creator of all that is, whatever you want to call it, loves you. They're going to keep giving you opportunities, and they sometimes make them bigger and richer, or sometimes we can call them more and more effing painful, so that you can start actually stopping and paying attention. Because if they're really subtle and not so bad, you just roll through them, as often we do. But when we look back, we go, oh, I feel like that happened there and it happened there, and now it feels bigger and now it feels worse and I'm done with it. And then that's when we get this wonderful opportunity, right, to, engage in a powerful coach or do growth work or suddenly reclaim our power back from those stories and create shifts. So agreed.
Absolutely. Like relationships are our biggest opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
The relationship I spoke of earlier where I manifested what I thought was the perfect man was a wound relationship.
Yeah.
It was the ultimate circumstance to serve the both of us to either in relationship. Now, it doesn't mean you have to break up necessarily, and that's a really important part here. I can't even English. An important part here. If two people are evolved and conscious enough of their war wounds, if you will, you can actually work through some of the wounds together and be in relationship. So because you're butting heads, I just want to make it really clear, it doesn't mean that you need to end the relationship and that the relationship is bad and wrong and you're not matched to each other. We have within relationship the opportunity at every turn to actually look at our own shit and address it. And sometimes this is really important again, which I unpacked, I think yesterday with a client, you will end a relationship and seek another one just to have the same thing happen. So different relationship, same problem. So sometimes it's actually worth staying in there and looking at your stuff and being quite open with them that this is an opportunity for each of you to heal your own stories. You do not have to do it alone, and you do not have to wait to be fully healed and this miraculous enlightened being to actually get a relationship either. You can call in love while you work with your work. Yes. That's often like the best time because you call in someone who's really quite open to hearing and understanding you from the get-go. So if you're honest and vulnerable and tell them in the right manner what you're working through, they have a chance to receive it and actually support you. Yeah. But sometimes, like in my circumstance, I had to not stay together in order for my soul to look at it deeply, because it wasn't willing to do that until I was without. Yeah. I wasn't ready to go there perhaps, but within relationship, that is your ultimate opportunity to look at this.
Yes. And it takes both partners though to be willing to do that growth dance together. Otherwise, what you tend to have is you might be willing to look at it and they'll just project, and then that will trigger your projection. So like you say, you're in these wounds, and it's very easy unless you're both really willing to do the work of what I call the warrior and look at your ways and with love hold space for the fact that none of us are perfect and all of us have our shit. Otherwise, we just bleed on each other, and then, we'll do that. And if it means that a relationship does also have to end for you, as you say, to take the time to grow yourself, the blessing in that is that the next relationship will be of a different frequency because you took the time, right, to do your own healing. So they're wonderful opportunities. And then we have to acknowledge too that some people will go into relationships that are wound relationships and stay there until the day they die because they are uncomfortable or unwilling to look at and address them. So I think the more our society, I've often said this because, I have a divorce behind me. We as a culture really need to understand that not all relationships will last or should last forever. And it's not a sign of two people not willing to work together or a lack of commitment. It's because some paths just don't go that far together. And if everybody's committed to their own growth and ascension, it's okay to go, great, we're parting ways here. Thanks for all the learnings up to here. Thanks for all the ways you supported me. Thanks for all the things. And now we go on. And I think that's a much healthier way to look at relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Attachment, right? Like if it ends, it's a failure. And I think that's one of the greatest hindrances to all of our individual growth and sovereignty is this attachment to forever.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how us humans really want to just have them and have them not leave us.
Yeah. Well, abandonment.
Get our claws in.
Yeah, that abandonment wound is universal for sure. Yeah. And it's all about conditioning and programming around, good girls and good boys and true love. And I mean, literally Disney has a lot to answer to in that respect, but we bathe in conditioning from the day we're born, and biologically we're wired to, resist this being aloneness. So yeah, there's lots of factors. So Sarah, what would you suggest if someone is, wanting to, like, what, like, if they're like, you know what, my love life is just a shit show. I don't even know where to start. I know I've got my stuff to deal with, although sometimes I really do feel it's just all them, wherever they're at, whether they're taking ownership or they're still projecting, it doesn't matter, because sometimes it will really feel like it's happening to you. And sometimes you'll start to get an awareness that you are in co-creation, but even then you can feel powerless. And, there's layers to the learning. But, what would be your biggest advice for someone who's out there going, maybe I'm just not meant for a relationship. Like maybe they're just in that place. What would be your advice to someone who's in that place at the moment?
I feel like that's far more common than what we probably give it recognition
for,
because a lot of people they're just too afraid to say it aloud because for what it might mean or what their friends might think, but that's where it sits as like a story, right? Where it's just like in here, we don't actually speak about it. So if they were thinking that there's no one for them, well, first of all, you need to address where that's coming from, because that, like, what part of them has made that decision? Is it out of fear that they're not going to find someone? Is that a protective mechanism? Like I feel even like within friends in my circles, it's they almost stop looking for a partner because it's just too hard, or like they're okay on their own, and we really don't know what's behind it unless you actually open up and work with a coach, of course, and actually look to that. So do you mean as in what they should do, or what, like,
do you believe that there is someone for everyone? What would be your answer if they're currently believing, what if I'm just meant to be alone, or maybe I'm not meant to be with someone, or maybe there's no one for me? So you're saying go and look at those beliefs, sit with that, maybe get a coach. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's their choice. They don't have to be with someone. If they truly in their heart don't want to be in partnership, who am I to tell them, oh no, you need a partner? Yeah. So they actually may not want to associate with another in that way. And I feel like the way we define relationships in our Disney worlds, or in how society should be from, say, the 50s or 60s, relationships can take very different shapes and forms nowadays. And spoke to my partner about this on the weekend with reference to a friend. And I feel like sometimes we get stuck that a relationship has to look and show up in a certain way. And if it's not going to show up with like the dog and then the marriage and then the 2 kids and what we should do and how it should look, like, it doesn't have to look like that. You can define your own relationship of how you want it to look like. That's why the clarity piece is so important. You in Western Australia here, fly in, fly out work is very common. There are many, many workers who both partners do fly in, fly out work, and they are very, very happy not seeing each other for a month. Like, they're totally happy with that. And I feel like it's a conversation that men and women don't have, that could be the fulfilling relationship that they're actually going to be quite happy, like absolutely happy and comfortable in. It doesn't have to be like living together and having children. We need to start to open up our definitions of relationships and realize that, yes, there's the divine timing, like all things, is always going to play a part in this, but you have a responsibility in how you show up and how you be. And you choose, like, in every moment you choose in how you're being, you're choosing what you're getting to receive and create. And if you don't want a relationship and you're sitting there, you do need to unpack it and have someone to have you like work with a coach or a professional that can hear you and hear what's happening behind the words and dive below that. Because sometimes it's because you're not aware you actually get to choose how your relationship shows up.
Yes.
Like, oh, I don't want what this looks like or how my family had it 30 years ago when I was 5. So you really need to look at how you want to define your relationship. You don't have to be in one.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's true of all things. Like, lots of people tend to kind of assume that they're supposed to have the wants that the world says we're meant to want. But when we really feel into it, especially if we do enough, inner growth work to understand ourselves well, it's very few things that we really need to feel fully lit up, alive, joyful, and whole. And when we know those things, we can meet them, and then from there come to the world. So I like what you're saying there. It's like, let go of the conditioning, let go of the idea of what it needs to look like. You do get to call it in. And the benefit to anyone listening who is single is if you do this work now, you won't have to do compromises later. You know, when you're like, oh, it's kind of working, but how do I, you know, you can just go, this is how I'd love it to look. So taking the time, as Sarah suggests, to not just feel into how you want to feel in a relationship, or you know, how you want it to play out, or who you'd like that person to be, what qualities you'd like them to have, but also what kind of lifestyle. Do you want time alone? Do you want to live in each other's pockets? Do you know, how do you want it to be? Because it really can be any way. And there is no right way. Like, there are, as you mentioned, relationships where people have a lot of separate time and space, which would, for other people, just feel like agony and horrible and not what they want. Yeah.
I feel like quite a common thread, I think even at the moment, with some of the people coming off the back of what we see on social media or the media, is that it might be hard to find a relationship or hard to find a partnership, and they're like open to anything.
Yes.
So if you're open to anything, you're going to get everything.
Yeah.
And to actually step back and start to think about what yes you want it to be, but people then get absolutely petrified of making a stand for it.
Yeah.
That's where they come undone. It's like, oh, this might be the person. Oh, I'll give them a chance. I'll run with it. I'll see what happens. It's like, well, no, like within a coaching space, it's like, you've given me your 5 values, and that's a bit of a process we go through together. It's like, these don't meet for you. And geez, Marina, for me, this was like, I had the best short relationship years ago. That was the perfect opportunity for me to be like in my mind, I was like, oh, but he's like all these things. And I had these beautiful rose-colored glasses on, and oh, maybe this, and he's got this, and he's got this, and he's successful, and he's athletic, and he's good looking, and he's like, oh, it's like the whole package. But was he actually monogamous, loyal? Like, he was quite open in his way of being.
Yeah.
Like, in full
wasn't a match.
this was a polygamous relationship. My value was to be with one man. Yet I was dancing in this domain of this amazing human who was fully aware of the powers of the universe and attraction, and had been groomed to be the most amazing man in partnership, and so aware. But this was with the man that we had multiple partners at the same time. And was I happy to like stand up and make a stand for what I actually wanted? No, I might just go with it. He might change his mind.
Yeah.
Literally settling. I learned about discernment. And I feel like people are actually scared of being a stand for what they want in relationships. Marina, I truly feel like there's a fear that it actually won't land. And if they're not going to claim it, and they're not going to be a stand for it, it's not going to land. They're going to keep getting wishy-washy. So,
well, yeah, there's that saying, isn't there, that if you don't stand for something, you fall for everything. But I think the fear is that there's a lack. It's the lack, underpinning lack mindset of us collectively about almost everything, that tends to have us, you know, abandon our truth and abandon our compass, because we're like, we'll take anything to avoid being without. And as a result, we're always without the thing that we want. So getting clear on what you want and just freaking waiting for it with patience. When you do that, when you declare it to the universe also unfolds. It's like, oh, no, they're not going to. Sometimes the universe is kind of lovingly shit testing you, because you're like, oh, I really want this, but maybe I'll take. And so they're like, oh, cool, is this okay? And if you go, yes, it's like, okay. But if you go, no, I told you already, it's this, then they're just eventually, you know, the energies that be, whether you look at this and however you view it, ultimately it will just drop into line, because it's not going to waste its time. It's a very efficient system.
So I wish more people would just be a stand.
Be a stand.
Be a
stand. And whether it's in relationships or anything, just be a stand. Don't, you know, really do the work to get clear on what that means in the different realms, and then go through life and kind of like use that as your compass or your auditing tools, and say yes to the things that are aligned and no to everything else, right? So, Sarah, what would be a book or an experience or something that you would love to reference or share for people who might be listening, that you're like, you know what, this was a game changer, team?
I do love a good read. So For me, I actually have a blog on my website, which is movetrainglow.com, of my top 6 relationship reads. So the one that was the biggest game changer for me personally was The Queen's Code, by Alison. Oh, I can't even draw on her surname right now. It's only available on Kindle or downloadable. You can't actually buy it at a bookshop, which did my head in. So good. I love an old school book. I tried for a long time to get it.
It's definitely a great book, and it is definitely one that would be for women in particular who find that men quote unquote fall short, because it really shows you what pattern you're likely playing out there. It's a very good book and very easy read.
Yes. And probably like as my next pick, I love the work. So for women, who are coming out of relationship, which a lot of my ladies are out of like 25-year marriages or 10-year marriages, and they literally never learnt themselves because they went straight from being like in puberty to their partner in marriage. Melissa Ambrosini's work, Open Wide, her new book is beautiful, as is Mastering Your Mean Girl, which has been around for a little while. But for people who are looking for a little bit more of a spiritual landing, and more sexual energies and that kind of attraction, because that's often where people want to facilitate their connection. So it's not just on a surface level, like sitting and chatting. It's a more of an energetic bond. You want to be looking at David Deida, The Way of the Superior Man, or Dear Lover, which is the women's version. So they're very, the man and female equivalents. They're brilliant.
Cool. We will link to all of those. They are indeed all good books. So as we go into just a rapid fire kind of series of questions at the end, what would be your number one tip for elevating energy? For anyone today is like, oh, I've got no energy. What would you suggest? What's your number one go-to?
I have something called my joy factor. It's like a hashtag on Instagram I do. It's literally the thing that brings you the most like instant joy. For me, it is mountain biking and being in the trees or being in Mother Nature. So they're not always accessible to us, depending on where you are in the world. I feel like it's quite important as even a relationship foundation to actually know what brings you joy and have it there on call always. So that's a homework piece for anyone listening. Have that. This is rapid fire. I'll stop talking.
Yes, good. And then what about a number one tip for elevating empowerment?
Oof, empowerment.
So if they're feeling like a little without confidence, or just a little not with, not accessing their own power, what would you suggest?
I would suggest to do something that, again, makes you happy though. Like I would still go to like your elevator, really. Cool, so you feel good. Yeah, that higher frequency. I love it. And then what would you suggest as a number one tip for elevating your expression so that you're putting what you're putting out into the world, like any tips around whether that's better communication or self-expression? I'd say create, and create can be anything. Create movement, create food, whether it's baking, create music, draw, color. I literally would start with creation for that, for expression, and then let that expand from there. Yes. I love that. And then what would if somebody had, accidentally fast forwarded, or perhaps imagine a reality where this entire podcast got deleted, except for the next, bit that comes out of your mouth. When you distill it all down, all of your journey in life and all of your lessons and your learnings, and I know this is a hard question, but it's always good to know what comes up and rises to the top, or downloads through. But, what would you say if we had a message in a bottle to the people on the planet, from Sarah, about what you've learned is really important at the end of the day? Like, what do they need to remember or know? The most important thing for me, which is the catalyst for all that is great in this world, is still your own joy. It still is. Like, and that is on your own, in relationship, at work, and it can be something as simple as that cup of tea on your table. Yeah. Like truly, that the little things. Yeah. Like the importance of taking that moment, however small, to just like, even if it's put moisturizer on your arm, or like brush your hair so it feels nice, like to feel good, and to do the small things. Like, we're not talking about hugely explosive, like whole other level changes. It literally comes back to how you're feeling in yourself in there, and like eat foods that make you feel good. Eat, like move your body how it feels good for you, and it's different for everyone. Like really take your life and be drawn to the things that actually bring you joy.
Yeah.
That has probably been my biggest lesson.
Yeah.
And everything comes from that. And share it, because that is literally the light. That is the light that you will give to the world. If you've done those things and you're like, however small, and you leave your house from, like, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be like a marathon or a run. That little sense of accomplishment and joy and that light that you have in yourself to walk into the world with, that just shines onto others, and it's a ripple.
Yeah. Well, it sounds cliche, doesn't it? But I mean, lots of cliches are there because they're true. But all relationships start from a healthy relationship with yourself. So everything you relate to in the world is a reflection, I suppose, of that relationship with yourself, which is why the people,
like, you see that in like some of my clients, we do like, it comes up, even if their intention initially is around relationships, it often comes up that an experience that they're having in relationship is playing out in their work perception, or in their like value of other facets in life. And sometimes we actually steer towards their approach in their business, or where they're getting stuck in some of, say, for example, with a client in content creation. Like, it literally has come from the very same pattern that is then playing out in relationships, because sometimes how we do things in small ways or in one way here will play out in other ways or facets of life.
Yeah.
So while I like to say I'm a relationship coach, it's like, you have a relationship to everything in this planet. You have a relationship to the food you eat. You have a relationship with your phone. You have a relationship to money. And yes, relationships in the love sense is beautiful, but you are relating to everything always and in all ways. So often, someone will come along just to attract a partner, and they're ready to like call in someone, and they want it to be a safe, sound landing and be receiving of, or ready to receive whatever it might be. We will end up doing a session or two on something that's happened or unfolded at work. And that is almost like the detour that's needed in order to then go, okay, can you notice how that's what you're also doing in relationship when you meet people? So yes, I'm a relationship coach, but it ends up deviating to wherever that pattern or that story is actually showing up in life, because usually when you heal it in one space, it shows up in another. It's a beautiful dance. It does your head in potentially when it keeps doing that.
Well, yes,
personally, but
that's often why, it's good to go deep, because if you go deep and heal the code, it doesn't show up in any domain. So yeah, it's the patterns that we're really working with. Sarah, that's awesome. And I agree. And I think that the world, as you said at the very beginning, needs more connection, and we don't need to be, ashamed of that. We don't need to be independent and brave and go it alone. We do, though, need to know ourselves, love ourselves, connect with ourselves as a precursor to healthy relationships. So we'll link to everything in the show notes to you, and people can reach out to you and your programs and your offerings. But thank you so much for who you be in the world and the way that you shine your light and your commitment to helping other people create really powerful, beautiful connections. I think that's so needed at the moment, especially. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Marina, for having me. It's been a joy to be here. Thank you.
All right. Big loves. I'll catch you soon. Bye.
Bye.